This is Ahead in Tech, career journeys of extraordinary people in tech and interviews that help you get ahead in your tech career. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm here today with David Grain. David, hello. How are you, sir?
Good, thank you. Sanjay, how are you?
I'm great, thank you, and it's always a pleasure to be here with you. I'm going to explain to everyone, but we've got a history, we've got a past, and we've got a bromance, if I can say that. So Dave, it's hard to believe of such a young-looking man, but you've got over 20 years in tech, primarily in sort of management and director level roles. The time that we worked together was at Compare the Market. In those few years, I think you went from you were a project manager and you went to delivery manager, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right, yep.
You've worked with a lot of different types of teams, a lot of different types of techs and stacks and types of products. You are currently the director of Agile delivery at EVRYTHNG, which you can tell us about in just a moment. People have a lot of time for you. You've got a very different. I don't know how to explain you. People have to know you to understand you. You're not a typical manager type person. You're very different. But I think that's why people really respect you and really like you. You've been working on a lot of amazing stuff, and I'm looking forward to catching up and hearing about some of the stuff you're doing. That you're doing on building and managing teams and delivering results like you've always done.
Thanks so much, Sanj. Yeah, we had a great time at Compare the Market. It was interesting, wasn't it? Because it was like a brand new business, because they were setting up just a digital hub in London. We were some of the first people there, so we got to build our own culture really in a really well established and widely known brand. But yet still got to embed our own engineering culture. And that was a really important time for me to learn both management of engineers and how investing time and energy into the career and progression of engineers can help with attrition and embedding them in the company and keeping them, well, not keeping them, that's probably the wrong word, but maintaining a relationship with them as a company for a longer period of time than you typically get in London. But we also got to build it like we wanted to build it. So it was a fantastic time. Definitely one of the highlights of my career, that 18 months that we all spent together in London.
Yeah, it was amazing. It's hard to believe that really happened, and it was such a privileged position that we were in, wasn't it? And what an amazing and fun time we had, but great work that we did and results that we delivered. Absolutely,
yeah. Just to establish the size of organisation that we did with the resources and people that we had at the time, it's just staggering when you think about it. But as I say, it was a steep learning curve for me that have helped me in my career since. And as you mentioned, I've worked in lots of different industries, got insurance aggregation, obviously with Compare the Market, then went on to banking, and now work in Internet of Things and kind of PaaS solutions, really, with everything. It really helps me with that breadth and depth and kind of really formalized my career path of going into organizations, helping them get to where they want to get with an agile transformation, typically with software engineers, doing that over like an 18-month, 2-year period, and then helping to maintain that and keep that running forward. And we successfully managed that in the banking side I was in before, and I was just in a meetup this week where they were talking about their cultural change over the last 3 to 4 years, of which I helped them originally before moving to EVRYTHNG, and we've done the same in EVRYTHNG. We've got a really strong delivery mechanic and strong set of engineering and product teams now working together.
I'm sure you do. I don't doubt it for 1 minute, especially if you're involved. So tell me, I know you've got the title of director, but really you were kind of explaining to me that you're more of an engineering manager by sort of maybe by choice or necessity. So tell me about what you're doing and about EVRYTHNG, please.
Yeah, it's a small organization. We have to sometimes wear many hats, 50, 60 people in the entire organization. So we have an engineering team of 16. I line manage anywhere between 9 and 11 engineers over the last year or so. So I'm responsible for the delivery mechanics of those teams. So looking at agile practices, lean practices, and kind of making sure that we're delivering to our client demand. But I'm also the line manager for a number of engineers across all the squads. And again, embedding my own personal sense of career growth, delivery, and T-shaped individuals, which we'll talk a little bit further about later. Because again, as a startup, it's necessary that we've got people and engineers in our teams that can wear many hats. We can't have a SQL DBA and two DevOps guys and a front-end guy in a team. We need a full-stack person and a node engineer who's really good at Postgres as well, just because of the limitations you have in resources. And you find that people and teams adapt in order to accommodate that over time. So whilst they may join your organization without Postgres skills, lots and lots, and certainly the best engineers I've worked with are really willing to learn and very, very capable to learn themselves, to mold their skills and mold their technical practices to fit the organization that they're now in.
In a sense, I mean, that's part of the challenge, right? It's part of the reward, right, of being almost forced to do that.
Indeed. That is the reward, yeah, but it's also the circumstance you find yourself in. Whereas you look at a bigger organization like Vanquis, who I worked at before here, that was massive, 1,500 people. People could just sit in their, silos of being, no, I'm a .NET engineer, that's what I do. There's a DevOps guy over there, I'm going to pass it over the fence. And for me, that doesn't make for the most effective delivery because you've got those silos. And there's two things at play there. One, communication. So I've done something, I've passed it over to you, you get on with your job now. If you don't effectively communicate that first time, there's a lot of backwards and forwards and there's time wasted there. But you've also then got just the actual physical act of a silo, often in different locations, sometimes in completely different offices. You've got that physical distancing as well, which means you can pass it off and you don't have that sense of responsibility because you can't even see that person sitting next to you. Whereas if you can do all that yourself, but still have those kind of deep expertise still in the team, so there's still someone who's really great at Postgres that can assist when you hit your blockers, Postgres databases, for example, you can learn enough to keep that 80% of the features that you're building ticking along. So I should probably just introduce everything very quickly. You did ask me to a moment ago, and I forgot. But for those that don't know, everything spelt slightly wrong. EVRYTHNG on purpose. That's our brand name. We essentially connect anything and give anything a digital identity. So whether that is the clothes that you're wearing, that picture you've got in the background there, this chair that I'm sitting on, that can have a digital identity. That means that you can capture data throughout the lifespan of that product. Now, how we capture that digital identity is in a multitude of ways, ostensibly via a QR code, but we're capturing that information all the way through the life cycle. So when this chair is being made, for example, in the factory, when they're putting the part, or before even the parts are put together, there may be individual QR codes on the arms and the legs and the back. The manufacturing process can scan those QR codes. And that would be the kind of birth of that digital identity. As that chair starts to get put together in the factory, it starts to get aggregated up into into a chair. And again, we pull together all those different digital identities to make one kind of next level identity. As that chair then goes out of the factory to a distribution center, scanned again, we can track where that product is. When it gets to a consumer, the actual brand that owns that chair can, say IKEA, can prompt the customer to scan that QR code, and we can see where it ended up with the consumer. That brand can also then direct the consumer to a consumer experience on a website using parameters such as location, when they're scanning it, if there's a competition in flight, etc., and actually engage directly with that customer who's just bought a chair, which is even more important in the world of e-commerce, where customers aren't going into shops. You haven't got direct face-to-face contact with that customer. You can then create that connection back to a customer and continue to have that conversation with the customer. And it works even more when it comes to the second-hand market, which is a big growth market at the moment. Obviously, we're talking about environmental aspects, but also post-COVID, especially with luxury brands that we work with. What's the second-hand market? What's the third-hand market look like? That digital identity right from the beginning, from the factory through the consumer, through to second-hand consumers, third-hand consumers, gives you a real rich set of data about that product itself. So we started off as an Internet of Things company, just connecting electronics to the internet, and it's now evolved to connecting anything to or everything to the internet.
Are you connecting humans yet? Could I get a little barcode on the back of my neck?
Well, it's frowned upon in scientific communities, but we'll have to see in the future, maybe.
Okay. All right. Okay. Don't mean to put you in a difficult position there. So look, that's a fantastic summary of what you're doing there and everything. And it's an amazing product. And it's like, it's really interesting to see, how far it's coming, because you've got quite a lot of major brands on board, right? Buying into this idea and using it actively.
That's right, yeah. So on our website, everything.com, you can have a look at the brands that we're working with. The big one we often talk about is Ralph Lauren. There's a few case studies on the website of that, but every single Ralph Lauren item produced since last year now has a fabric QR code stitched in as part of the production process that a consumer can scan, and we can track that digital identity from the beginning all the way through to the end. And the kind of use cases are endless as well. It's not just traceability and consumer engagement. We're talking about authenticity. So you've got grey market. So the companies knowing where their product is in the world. Is it being shifted or sold in the wrong markets? We've got traceability. So if someone has to recall an item and it's in a distribution center, using our technology, and because we're gathering the data points, you can know with a certain level of confidence that where it is, and therefore being able to recall that item more successfully than you can at the moment, which is basically put a poster in the shop saying, please bring this item back, which isn't the best consumer experience.
So look, amazing stuff you're doing there, and people can come to your website, everything.com, to check it all out. I want to now move on to stuff that concerns me more, which is your tech teams. This is all the interesting stuff that you've been doing. And, I want to catch up. I want to know what you've been thinking. So let's start from the beginning of the funnel. What's going on in recruitment?
It's an interesting time for recruitment in this post-COVID world. We have focused over the last 6-ish months of trying to extend our reach beyond our traditional markets in terms of recruitment. So our engineering teams are based in the UK, Belarus, and Russia at the moment. Belarus is an outsourced company called Cyclum, similar to companies we worked with in Compare the Market like Godel, who are kind of an outsourced partner, right? We treat those people like they're permanent members of staff, and some of them have been with us for a number of years rather than kind of burst capacity where they come in and out. But we treat them like permanent members of staff, but because we don't have a legal entity in Belarus, we have to have an outsourced partner. Now, those three locations have been the traditional locations we've hired in within everything. However, in this post-COVID world where we can work fully remote, we don't have to have an office space in London, in Minsk, as we do at the moment. We have extended that reach and started to use what's called an employee of record, which is a legal term. That means that via a third-party company, you can establish an entity in a country and then start to employ people in that country. So we can extend our reach fully remotely to other countries. So we've extended to 4 or 5 European countries at the moment, which just means that we can recruit in those markets. And what we found is that using cloud-based tools like Workable, which is the recruitment platform that we use, we can simply and easily distribute advertising and recruitment and start posting on LinkedIn and target those markets very, very simply from within the organization. We don't have a talent manager that's sitting there and trying to pull in engineers when we need to go and hire. And the very nature of startups often means you have to hire very quickly. Maybe you've won a new client and that new client needs their thing in a couple of months. Therefore, we need to get X engineer in as quickly as possible. We don't have a talent manager to do that. So it's often us as engineering leadership team going into the Workable solution, setting up the adverts using our standard templates and pushing them out to those 4 or 5 markets. Now, our response rates have been pretty good, and we've been relatively successful in the last 6 months of hiring in a distributed set of markets, just using the tools that are out there now, without having to go through agencies, we're not having to bring through external people, but just by combining a recruitment platform like Workable with the legal entity of an employee of record, it means we can extend our reach and massively extend the talent pool, right? There's obviously some commercial benefits to the organization as well. It's traditionally cheaper to hire people in the mainland of Europe than it would be in London, which is a relatively expensive place to hire engineers because of the cost of living in London. So there's commercial benefit, but there's also just a massive talent pool available now. And then it comes down to the funnel, right? So how do you, if you're inundated with applications, I'll give you an example. I hired a Scrum Master, not an engineering role, but obviously to assist with our Scrum teams towards the end of last year. In 24 hours in 5 different countries, including the UK, but outside of London, I had 126 applications. So how do you take that kind of volume of applications as an individual and then decide whether you're going to invest the time, the effort in interviewing those individuals? So we've come up with a criteria that we apply to kind of reduce the pipeline effectively. We run very short, sharp screening sessions that have a set kind of format where we introduce the company, they introduce themselves, and as part of that, we make a decision then, therefore, if we move then onto the practical or technical examinations for the individuals. In terms of engineering, we don't do tech tests. In our interview process, we do paired programming examples. Instead, that's much more practically aligned with how we work as individuals. We are pairing over Hangouts all the time, all day, every day. We're definitely advocates for extreme programming practices and pairing specifically. So we like to see people doing that. And actually, it paints a different picture than a tech test. A tech test you can set at home, you can sit there, you can tap away, you can build it yourself over a number of days or hours. Whereas pairing, you have to think on your feet a little bit more. You have to engage with people as part of the process as well. So you're using lots of different soft skills and technical skills at the same time. And it gives us a really good indication of how that person would operate in a team scenario, right? And that's what it all comes down to at the end of the day. You need to be able to operate in a team and work with your colleagues in order to solve complex problems in engineering. So we do 2 interviews, that's it. We turn around that process. The speed of which you have to operate in terms of recruitment is very key as well, because it's a fast moving industry. We do 2 interviews and done. So the initial one would be with myself, kind of 20 minutes, half an hour, and then we do like an hour, 90-minute paired programming technical test with our tech leads, and usually myself, and maybe our DevOps guy as well, if it's necessary. Then we make a decision, and then we move on. So that's we try and keep it as simple as possible in terms of recruitment, but it's starting to yield results in terms of the talent pool we have available globally now.
That's great. I mean, no tech tests sounds like definitely the right way to go. You know, it sounds like you're moving in the right direction for sure. And I know there's been a lot of change in the recruitment space, especially when it comes to like engineering, because I don't think I'm the only one who's completely fed up of tech tests. The thought of having to do a tech test is killing me right now. I'm not going to do any more tech tests. And
you find they're all broadly the same, right? They might have slight spices, slight variations, but there's got to be a better way of doing it. It's so abstract from your actual working life, right? I don't know what you find, but a tech test is so alien to how you work, which is ultimately about how you work with people. That's the important thing. And for me, the probation period is absolutely critical as well. So you're never going to learn enough about someone in 90 minutes, 2 hours to know whether they're going to be a true fit for your organization. You can make some approximations. Clearly, if there's any red flags, you don't continue. But that is what the probation period for. If the person can't do what they say they can do on their CV, that will be very, very clear within that first 3-month period. Correct me if I'm wrong, but my sense of the hiring market, at least here in London or the UK anyway, is like during the last sort of 18 to 12 months, during COVID, junior or less experienced hiring took a huge dive, and it's only now recovering. It's sort of back to where it is now. And the mid and senior level, the more experienced people, that demand has grown
even more than it was before?
Yeah, so we only really have mid or senior engineers and everything. So I've not been that exposed to the London market as well, as you say. But anecdotally, and what I see on the recruitment channels as well that I keep up to date with, I definitely agree with your point. I think the reason for that is that if you're going to spend, I don't know, let's make up some numbers, but 30k on a junior engineer or 80k on a senior, they'd rather get that senior engineer in now while we're in difficult and unpredictable times, so that they can start working. Actually, onboarding junior engineers, mentoring them, giving them the support that they need has been difficult over the last 12 months and will be difficult, and needs time to mature in this kind of remotely distributed world, right? So those kind of activities that were on the periphery that need a little bit more effort, need a little bit more time, have kind of got cut as part of the COVID situation that we find ourselves in. And companies have really just focused themselves on delivery. What do we have to deliver? What projects are key to our strategic vision? And just focus on that strategy rather than necessarily getting that pipeline of junior engineers through. I'm a big fan of bringing in junior engineers. We did a lot on Compare the Market with Makers Academy. We adapted a lot of our recruitment processes in order to bring junior engineers into the organization. It was a key KPI for us. And I actually think that's a very healthy way to build engineering teams, because it gives the senior engineers the ability to gain some experience and exposure to mentorship as they progress through their career. And you can see, and they can then start to make ideas about what their future looks like. Is it in management? Is it, or do I want to focus more on the technical side and be a solutions architect or an applications architect, whatever I want to be? But also, you got the youth coming in with different ideas and an appetite. Especially people that have come through a code academy, have such a strong desire to be successful because they've put themselves through the code academy. They've paid their money themselves to do that. They now really want to drive home the fact that they're in a job. They're very, very pleased to have a job in the industry that they'd personally targeted themselves, and are very, very aggressive is probably the wrong word, but very motivated to do well. Every single person that I've worked with that's come through our Code Academy.
Moving on to the care and maintenance of tech teams, because this is something you're very good at. So let's imagine, I'm a new dev joining your team. What do I see and feel that's different to the old days? How have we moved along?
Well, I think there's a lot more thought about the long-term career of an engineer, and I'll just share this on the screen very quickly, just so I can talk through it. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is something that if you did a business studies degree or something like that, you would know Maslow's hierarchy of needs quite well. I think it's just loading at the moment. Yeah, there we go. So that is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But what I like to talk about and the way that I think about engineering is how we support these needs. And for me, to get to self-actualization that we see at the top of the pyramid here is the definition of an engineer who is self-motivated, who is happy, who is productive. And that's where we want to aim to get to when we're working with engineers. So we start at the bottom here, the psychological and safety needs. That's the bare minimum that an organization should provide for any employee that they ever have, right? So that is, have I got a laptop that works? Is there HR functions that are going to support me in the organization? Do I have a desk to go to or a place to work, right? Just the bare minimum. Now, if companies don't get that right, forget about high attrition jobs like software engineers who could, especially in London, move next door or within 100 yards of where they are and probably find another job. That's true of any job, right? If you do not get the psychological and safety needs right, you will not retain staff for a decent period of time, right? So baseline, have to get that right. Next one, belonging and love needs. This is where the Agile delivery teams, like Scrum teams, Kanban teams, whatever method you're using in Agile, come in, because we create a sense of team and well-being, right? Do you have a sense of respect for one another, and the culture that supports engineering? So have they got like a training program to help me progress in my career? Have they got a clear career path that I can visualize for myself for the future? That will give me a sense of belonging and love needs. And Scrum really helps with that, with that segment, right? And then we can move on to the next stage, which is the esteem needs. And this is where companies start to stand out, right? So psychological and safety needs, bare minimum. Belongingness and love needs. If you adapt Agile practices, you will probably cover that segment as well. And that's when we get to the esteem needs. And this is where an engineering manager can start to really earn their worth. This is where you're working with the individual to help them understand their brand. So I'll ask you a question, Sanj. What is brand Sanjay? How do you like to be known in the companies that you work?
Technical excellence, clearly, Dave. I guess bringing solutions to problems, and bringing people together and delivering.
Very good, very good. And what do you see as the future for brand Sanj? Where do you want to get to?
I mean, a possible future would be, lots of other little Sanjs running around, So I'm just the brain, and there's lots of little hands, who are equally as good as me, and I can expand brand Sanj.
Indeed. And my job as an engineering manager, right, is not to come and tell you off and lay down the law, is to support the establishment of that brand, right? That's the way I like to talk about it with all our engineers that I work with, is how do we establish that brand and allow you to move on in your career, right? We have to have a plan. That plan will probably change, much like any Agile practice that we follow. But let's put together a plan about how we can support that brand for you. And that really supports the esteem needs that you see at the top there. Now, once someone's established their brand, we move into self-actualization at the top there, where they're executing that brand, they are performing at a very high level, and they're actually, by proxy, really, really supporting the rest of the engineering community significantly through showcases, through technical excellence, and helping to drive maybe even new technical ways of working. And we get to that self-actualization phase. And that's the way I like to think about all the stages that I work with engineers. We often start at the very bottom, not necessarily my role to support with the psychological and safety needs, psychological a little bit, because obviously people need the engineers that work for me need to trust me. So I try to inhabit that trust, but the company are kind of responsible for the bottom one. But everything from belonging and love needs upwards, from a delivery manager and an engineering manager, is absolutely a responsibility for me, for the people that work with me.
So reading between the lines, it's almost not the day-to-day technical work stuff that you need to look after. It's like everything else. It's like the person, the people on your teams.
I absolutely trust that the people that I work with can do the work on a day-to-day basis, right? As long as the feature and what we're trying to achieve is clear, there is a clear vision. And again, we're coming back to the kind of Agile delivery side of my job, that side of my face. I feel a bit schizophrenic talking about two different sides to me, but that's all right. We'll call it delivery, Dave.
There are lots of different sides to you, Dave, that's for sure.
But on the delivery Dave side, as long as the vision of what we want to deliver is clear, and the people have the skills to do it, obviously, then pretty much people get on with their job. Most people want to come to work, do a good job, be challenged, solve problems. And as long as we put that in front of them, they'll go and do it. My main job as an engineering manager, and the hard bit, is helping people move up this pyramid and progress in their career. We've had lots of success with people that I've worked with moving up. I remember when I met you for the first time, you were kind of maybe 2 years out of Makers, 1 year out of Makers?
No.
Or was it longer?
Weeks. When
weeks, so even less. There you go. There you go. You're much more mature than I thought. You were weeks out of Makers. And look at that, 4 years later now, 2016 we met. Yeah. So 4 years later.
6 years later, Dave.
Is it? Well, there you go. Time flies. It is 6 years later. Yeah, 2015. All right. People, if you give people the guidance, and my job is to help that individual engineer progress, right? It's not to placate management. It's not to enforce the law that management want us to enforce. It's to help the people on the ground, the people that are delivering, to progress in their career and to support them to both deliver and self-actualize and establish their career as well.
So looking back at the last 18 months, I know it's kind of different for you because, you've had largely remote and distributed teams. But how did the pandemic affect you, or what's your sense of how the pandemic affected the industry as a whole? And I'm asking in relation to sort of team culture and dynamics.
It's certainly put a different spin on it, right? I am personally someone who works much better face-to-face with people. There's certainly speed that you can gain in building a team when you're all face-to-face in one location. But that's not the reality of the situation now. So one of the key issues over the last 12, 18 months, and will continue to be as the industry evolves, and as always, engineering and technical roles are at the forefront of evolution of jobs, right? We'll be one of the first people to follow this. Remote working, as I mentioned earlier, is here to stay, right? Companies, certainly smaller companies, but it will start to dissipate up to larger organizations, will realize that they can hire talent wherever the talent is. It doesn't need to be in a specific place where your headquarters are. The challenge for my kind of role is, how do you continue to motivate teams when you're not in the same room? Now, it's a hassle to set up a calendar invite, jump on a hangout just for a chat, right? You lose all those small micro interactions that you would have in an office. Social events, for example, which I think are very, very key to establishing and building a team, because your mind, you're just using a different bit of your mind than you do in the day-to-day when you're in a social situation. And one of the things we established very, very well in Compare the Market is that we had a strong sense of social endeavor running through the team, whether it was just a couple of people going out for a beer, whether it was organized event, whether it was doing meetups. We did all these different types of bits and pieces, going out for some food together. It's really, really important in the establishment of teams, and applying Conway's law, which is the forming, storming, norming, performing, Tupman theory, not Conway's law, forming, storming, norming, performing, building up through those phases can be exasperated, can be moved much, much quicker by spending some time outside of the day-to-day and the coding work. And that's a bit that's gone. So we have to find other ways that we can use to establish that, whether that is online events, whether that is meeting up on a regular basis for a specific type of ceremony. What we do in everything, and what we will return to once we can safely, is we do a kind of release train, a quarterly planning process, where at the beginning of each quarter we get together, we establish what goals we're going to tackle over that 3-month period, set ourselves some OKRs around those goals. And we used to do that in person, so either in Minsk or in London. I'd like to get us back to doing that again, even if we are in Portugal, Germany, I don't know, wherever, Belarus, establishing one place, getting together for at least a week every quarter, so we can spend some time just with each other, whether that is through refinement and working out ideas and stories and scoping out work, but also just some downtime, just to have a beer or have a soft drink and just chat, get to know people differently. I noticed something. We went to the office last week for the kickoff of our quarter. All of the London engineers went in the office, 8 of us. 2 of the engineers I'd never met before. I'd only met on video and interviewed and employed for the last 6 months and never met them. But even the people that I had met before, I'd forgotten what their body shape was. So I knew their head and how they acted, but I'd forgotten how big they were or how muscly they were or just them as beings, right? We've lost this sense. You've lost part of my brain now has just lost this sense of the whole person, and we're all just floating heads, right? talking.
Because there's the physicality and body language and interpersonal behavior. It kind of changes when you're actually literally face to face.
Completely different. It's much easier to debate ideas. And I think the thing that we have suffered on, we've done very, very well in delivery. So focused on our goals and identified what our vision is for that period of time and delivered it. But what you lose in that aspect is the ideas, just throwing around ideas. And that's when some of the best things, some of the magic happens as well. So whilst we've been able to drive the business forward, at some point we've lost some magic. There's some magic ideas we have definitely lost over the last 18 months, just because people on a video call won't be able to get their points across, haven't got the time to really just ruminate and think. You're always trying to get to a goal on a video call, right? What's the agenda? Let's get to that action item. Let's get to the goal. You haven't got that space, that time, just to chat and throw around ideas. And that's a bit we need to establish. And I will say I certainly haven't got that 100% right yet, but we need to start working on tooling. One of my engineers mentioned yesterday, a friend of his has trialed a VR headset. So all the people in the office put on a VR headset and it's like you're in the office. So you can physically see the people, their body reacts and moves to the VR. I'm not convinced that's the future because the VR headsets are a little bit unwieldy, but some combination of that in the near future where you can at least be in a shared surrounding and be around and feel that presence of other people and see their body language. It's got to be important rather than just the focus on, I've got this widget to build the widget. Here you go, here's the widget. Yeah.
Get on the call with my line manager, talk through my points, get it done,
Exactly. It's good for business because they're getting stuff done, right? But it's not necessarily good for new creative ideas. And I know for a fact we have lost ideas over the last 18 months as a company and worldwide that may have been a magic bullet, right? We just never know.
It'll be really interesting to see how things play out over the next 18 months, especially with people starting to go back into the office now and engineers generally resisting that.
Yeah, I think it'll be a hybrid. That's my personal opinion. Do you think that in 2 years' time, we'll look back and everything would have just gone back to how it was in 2019, 2020?
I don't know. I think maybe it'll be like 80% back to where we were, and there'll have to be more flexibility, and places that would not entertain the idea of working from home before now very much have to, and places that were letting you work from home like once a week, maybe now they'll need to do 2 or 3 times a week, It's my opinion.
Well, we've proven that we can deliver, right? You tell me what to do, we'll still deliver it. The flexibility it affords is amazing. So I could take my children to school now. I can spend some time with them after school and work around my life rather than work being my life, rather than getting up at 7, leaving the house, getting home at 7 at night, seeing them in the morning, putting them to bed. That was about as good as I got for 10 years of my oldest son's life. But now you can play a bit of football in the garden or play a game with them, which just means you've got happier employees overall, right? Which is ultimately what companies would want. Again, back to the attrition point. If you want to retain employees for a long period of time, give them that kind of lifestyle and they'll find less reasons that they'll want to move on and go for a new challenge.
Something really interesting you said to me, I think like a few weeks ago, when maybe it might have been the last time we spoke, was you started talking about managers having to become more cross-functional and more multidisciplinary, and this opened up a can of worms. So can you tell me what you think the future of cross-functional teams are going to be? And I know you have a little diagram to share. I'd love to see it.
The idea of a T-shaped individual has been around ages, right? When we worked together before then, right? But it's pretty much only ever really been talked about in the world of engineering. And what a T-shaped individual means is that you've got some surface skills, so the top of the T that you see here, and then you've got deep expertise in an area, right? So if we think about an engineer, their surface skills might be infrastructure, their deep expertise, might be React, right? So they are ostensibly what we would traditionally call a front-end engineer, but they have a little bit of surface skill, so a broad knowledge about infrastructure. What happens when you then combine those two things together? Over here is that you've got the infrastructure along the top as the broad skill, and you've got React as their deep skill, right? So essentially, that's a DevOps. That's DevOps as a DevOps engineer, right? So I can dabble a little bit in AWS, but essentially, I'm a React front-end engineer. Now, why is that specific to engineering? That's been my concern for some time, and I think as we go through the next 5 to 10 years, in terms of engineering managers, and actually any role within an organization, we'll start to see more and more what we call T-shaped individuals. Now, they may exist already, and people may think they're T-shaped individuals already, and they may well do outside of engineering. But I think, again, as I said earlier, about engineering leading the way, establishing ways of working and recruitment practices and global reach for talent, etc. I think other parts of the business will start to look at this and say, actually, why don't we establish that for other roles? I've got a good example, CPTO. Have you ever heard of that senior executive role that exists now?
No, sir.
Yeah, so companies like Curve, for example, someone that we used to work with actually is a CPTO at Curve. Matt, that is Chief Product and Technology Officer. So they've combined the cross-functionality of the skills of someone who's very, very technical, who could be the CTO, along with product, because the emphasis of the organization is so embedded in technology, those two things cannot be separated from one another. Both product and technology must be aligned at a strategic level in order to establish the right ways of working, the direction of an organization. And that's a great example of a T-shaped individual, is someone who is well practiced in product practices and can articulate what a product should do, as well as having a deep understanding of technical practices. But that could extend to anything. You could have a finance person who knows infrastructure, and that person could be responsible for your AWS estate, for example, because they can articulate in a broad sense the infrastructure, but can really deep dive into the pricing, the costing, with their financial knowledge, and help organizations move forward. So that I think the concept of T-shaped individuals will only grow and grow as we start to automate and establish more mechanisms for dealing with kind of what you'd call day-to-day jobs, day-to-day activity that could be automated. We'll then start to look to those T-shaped individuals to cover broader areas of the business. We can establish, and we see that in engineering of engineering managers as well. You get quite a lot of adverts now that are looking for engineering managers who can do a bit of delivery, or the other way around. Delivery manager is a fine example. They are essentially scrum masters who can also do a bit of line management. So they have a real deep understanding of agile practices, but a broad understanding of line management and can line manage people.
I know, at least in engineering, do we nurture our engineers to be generalists, or do we nurture them to be, specialists? And then people go, no, it should be like 60-40, or it should be 90-10, And I don't know if I've ever heard like a good argument for like one way or the other.
I think the cat's out of the bag a little bit now, right? We saw it in Compare the Market when we worked there, is that there was an expectation you would know a bit about Mongo, a little bit about AWS, even if that is just 20% of your role. You would have to have a notion of those services in order to even survive in that kind of environment. In everything, we've taken that even further, and I've done some analysis recently, actually, in the last quarter. We did very, very little of what the engineers were employed for. So a node engineer, we wrote very, very few new node services. A significant amount of the work that we're doing was what I would categorize as DevOps work and database work. So writing appropriate queries in order to extract data in our business intelligence systems, building, using Terraform and establishing more Terraform modules. So we've got infrastructure as code as well as functional code. And what you'll find is that, as I said earlier, engineers are very adaptable individuals and very curious individuals, because you have to be, and very creative individuals. So if you combine those things together, the creativity, the curiosity, you'll get people that want to learn about new things just by the very nature of the job that they do.
Fantastic, Dave. These are all great reasons why people should come work for you, right?
Indeed. Do
you have any open roles right now?
We don't at the moment, but using our website, everything.com, and on our careers page, you can drop us a line with your CV, and as soon as we come to open up again, probably towards the end of the year, Q4, we'll be looking to hire probably QAs or SDETs and potentially full stack engineers. So anyone in, we use Node on the back end, React on the front end. So anyone with those skill sets, feel free to drop us a line, and as soon as a role becomes available, we'll be in touch.
Fantastic. You're an amazing person. I would highly encourage anyone who's considering it to definitely apply. So
thanks, mate.
Before I let you go, I need the joke of the show.
So it's a bit of a rubbish one, but I will tell it anyway. So my son actually wrote this joke over the Christmas period. If you think back into COVID times, just before Christmas, we had all these different tiers, didn't we? All over the country. People were in 4, 3, 1. No one knew what was going on, right? So my son was watching the television, and he said, Dad, I've got a joke for you. I went, go on then. And he said, why was Boris Johnson crying?
Why was Boris Johnson crying? I don't know.
Because he had one too many tears.
He has one too many tears.
Exactly.
That's a good joke.
It's used a play on words there between tears and tears, but
he's got a bright future ahead of him, this kid.
Maybe stand-up comedy is the way to go.
Yeah,
Forget engineering, stand-up comedy.
Oh yeah, forget a STEM career. Stand-up comedy, that is the path to success, my friend.
Indeed, it's a hard life.
It is. Cheers, Dave. Thank you very much. This has been absolutely wonderful. I always love talking to you, and I really appreciate your time.
Thanks. Yeah, and you, Sandy. It was great to catch up again, and best of luck with the podcast. It's going really well.
And that's all, folks. More info, links, and everything else can be found on aheadintech.com. Thank you, and please subscribe.